Hey guys, how have you all been? Hope you all are doing pretty good. And welcome back to Coding Adda. Welcome back to yet another series on AI. So I see many of the tutorials which are on YouTube, which are focused on creating applications using AI. But as a developer, as a student, you need to know what are the core concepts of AI. What happens when you give up a prompt onto ChatGPT behind the scenes. So I thought of why not creating a playlist with where I will be talking about all the core concepts of AI, how things work behind the scenes, but in a very different way using some stories. So I'm really excited about this series, how this series will be going to go. And particularly in this video, we are going to understand what happens actually when you send a prompt to ChatGPT. So without any further delay, let's get into the computer screen and let's start with the video. So this is the entire story of what actually happens when you send a prompt to ChatGPT. But these are just blank boxes. Don't worry, we will go on all of these things step by step. So the first step here starts with introducing the characters. The first character is you. You are someone who wants to send a prompt. You are the king. You are the prince here. And the second one is the model. The model being the king, the ruler of the kingdom. So you as a user, your task is to send a prompt. For example, sending for this particular video, we are going to use the example of explain quantum computing simply. And the king here will give you the response, just like ChatGPT, understand and generate the response. So what happens here behind the scenes? Take up a very first box. So we'll be unlocking all the boxes one by one and explain understanding what happens one after the other. So the first step, you give a prompt to ChatGPT, right? Or for example, here you are sending a prompt. So what happens? There are gatekeepers standing right at the front door. What are the tasks of gatekeeper? The task here is to break down your particular input into smaller chunks. For example, we can say the gatekeeper acts as the tokenizers, meaning the prompt is broken down into smaller pieces called tokens. For example, the input that we gave here was explain quantum computing simply. And when we convert it into tokens, these words are differentiated between one word, second word, third word, and fourth word. And whenever you give a simple, exclamation mark or any other special characters, that is also considered as tokens. So here what happens is the gatekeeper convert the input into smaller pieces known as tokens. So this is the first step that happens when you give your prompt to GPT. Next, once the tokens are generated, the next step here is to convert the tokens into embeddings. Here we have a series of translators sitting here which convert the tokens into something called as numerical representation that capture the meaning of the tokens. Here, as you see, there are 3 or 4 translators sitting here who are doing some mathematical analysis and converting the input into something in a numerical representation. So the same tokens that are given here, like explain quantum computing simply, are now converted into zeros and ones. It is a numerical representation. And this is called embeddings. The new tokens which are converted into a numerical representation are known as embeddings. Once we have the embeddings, once the translator translates the tokens into embeddings, the next step is given to the transformers and attention council. Here we have a list of people. Here we have the Royal Council. What do they do? The council analyzes the relationship between all the tokens and understands the context. Here we have something known as transformer architecture and self-attention mechanism, which was introduced by Google and which will help us to gain the relationship between all the tokens, embeddings, and generate a meaningful context which the LLM will understand. Okay, so this is the third step where we are giving the tokens and embeddings into the transformer mechanism. After that, this is where the king comes into picture. Here we do the inferencing, where we have the king's decision. What happens over here is the king predicts the next most likely token based on the context. Based on the input, embeddings, and the context, what the king will do is it will predict like, okay, what should be the next token or what should be the next word that I'm trying to give here. So here the probabilities of the next token could be is, in, works, uses, by, and the probability will be given a number. As you see here, the next most possible token would be buy, because here the probability is 0.68 as compared to the other tokens. Okay. Once the king has made his decision, like, okay, the inferencing is complete, next is it is given to the royal scribers. Scribers have the task to generate the output. The chosen token is added to the response and the process repeats token by token until the response is complete. This step is a continuous process. And once the king says like, okay, I am done with predicting the next token, I don't have any next token to predict right now, it will give it to the scribers and the scribers will say, okay, this is the response which is generated so far. So as you see, the current response generated is quantum computing works by. Okay. Once this is generated, next it is given to the messenger, where the messenger returns the final response. The messenger gives you the complete response into the UI. And hence we get the response like quantum computing works by qubits that can exist in multiple states. Okay. So this is how the things behind ChatGPT happens. It starts from creating a token, then into the embeddings, then using the transformer and self-attention mechanism, the context is analyzed, then it does the inferencing where we have the next token prediction, and then we get the output generated in a streamlined response by the LLM. So this is how, if given a prompt or if ChatGPT had its own kingdom, this is how the things would work inside that. Okay, and let's now understand this in a much technical way. We need some technicalities here. So say you have the user prompt, explain quantum computing simply. This prompt is then converted into tokens by the tokenizer, which will divide each word into separate tokens. And then they are converted into token IDs. Once the token IDs are converted, these are then converted into a numerical representation called embeddings, where we have a meaningful representation between the tokens. Once the embeddings are generated, we have the self-attention mechanism where we have the transformer layer, which will understand the meaningful context between the embeddings and help us generate the next token. This is where the next token prediction comes. We find out the next word that we need for completion of the response. Once we have the next token predicted, we generate the text. This next token prediction is now then decoded. The earlier step where we have the tokenizer, it encodes the token. It converts the words into numbers. Here in the decoding part, it will convert the numbers into the words. And once this is decoded, we get the final response saying quantum computing works by using qubits. Okay, so this is how the entire working of how ChatGPT works is done. So in this particular series, what I'm focusing on is to explain these complex concepts in a much easier manner using some examples like kingdom, using some movie examples, using a storyline, so that things like this can be, learned in a much easier manner than, going to the documentation, reading the entire. With the help of these good AI image generation models, I think teaching has become much easier to students on different, tough concepts, easier concepts. Personally talking about myself, this way of learning has helped me a lot to understand very complex concept in a very easier manner. And I hope to do the same for all of you guys watching this particular video, watching this entire playlist. So yeah, let me know or how did you like this way of explanation of how ChatGPT works. If you like it, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next one. Until then, bye bye.